Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon. I'd like to wish you a very warm welcome to this Global Landscapes Forum. And this welcome goes out to not only all of us here in the room, but to everyone who is following online on the live video feed at landscapes.org. Just a few quick housekeeping remarks before we begin. For those of you tweeting the conference, we'd please ask that you use the hashtag GLF COP19. To all of us present here in the room, you will notice that there is Wi-Fi in all of the rooms that we're using today. We'd ask that you please use the Wi-Fi called GLF Public. The password for that network is Global PUB 13. You also may have noticed that in an effort to save some paper, that your program books are quite slim. For the full program and lineup, there has been a smartphone app developed, and directions and access to that app are available in your printed guidebook. One final remark is we'd like to extend our thanks to the University of Warsaw for hosting this conference and providing us with such a great venue to be able to share and collaborate over the next few days. And so with that, I'd like to introduce the Vice-Rector for Research, the University of Warsaw, and Liaison Professor, Mr. Alojzy Nowak, to give a formal opening introduction from the University of Warsaw.
Good afternoon, everybody. I am honored and privileged to have the possibility to say hello to all of you. Warsaw University is extremely pleased that such a prominent people decided to come to Warsaw and to be for a few hours at Warsaw University. Welcome, all of you and each of you. I'm extremely pleased because this meeting, this conference, is extremely important. It is extremely important because it's about future. We all have to think not only about profit. However, I am an economist, so to some extent, I am a barbarian among most of you. Because not only profit is important. Sustainable development, people and nature are as much important as economic growth and economic profit. I had a chance to meet some of you and some students from different places today and yesterday attending this conference, this meeting, and most of them were very happy, admired you, because you decided to talk about the future, about them and about their children. I am extremely pleased that you will be discussing in our country, in Poland, which has been doing a lot in terms of environment protection, in terms of sustainable development, about the future of Europe, about the future of the world. I am absolutely sure that the eminent people sitting here at the table will give you their own perspective, and not only most of us perspective on what is going on. I wanted also to say that the University of Warsaw is always and will be always open for you and for such events we have been experiencing today. So, if you have any business, any interest in the future, feel free to come to us. Feel free to share your viewpoints with us. Feel free to send your kids to us. Feel always, even if you are in danger, and if we can help you, we will always try and do the best to help you. Thank you for coming. Have a nice stay in Poland, in Warsaw, and at Warsaw University. I wish you all the best, and thank you again for coming and being with us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Vice-Rector Nowak, for the kind words and the very warm welcome. I'm very proud to introduce now Peter Holmgren, the Director General of the Center for International Forestry Research, CIFOR. Peter?
Thank you very much. I'll stand here, I think. It's great to see you all. Very much welcome to the first day of the Global Landscapes Forum. On behalf of the coordinating partners, that is CIFOR and CCAFs, and also the Collaborative Partnership on Forests and the Agriculture Consortium, it's a little bit complicated. But I'm pleased to welcome you all. I wish to thank Vice-Rector Alojzy Nowak for hosting this conference on this beautiful campus. I understand this is the lecture hall for the law students, so beware of that. Now, some people have asked me, where did the idea of the Global Landscapes Forum come from? And if you consider that, I'm a forester, so if you consider that deforestation is by and large the expansion of agriculture, then you might also consider that RED is to a large extent an agriculture project. And also consider that agriculture very much depends on ecosystem services, many of those coming from the forest. And consider that 2 billion livelihoods depend on landscapes. It wasn't very difficult to draw the conclusion that we need a landscapes forum. And so we considered this, and we managed to put together a consortium that came together, large number of organizations, some difficult discussions, but at the end of the day, we all agree that having a global landscapes forum is a great idea. And when we got the opportunity to have it here in Warsaw, that was it. Now we're here. Well, we should also consider for today's proceedings the importance of research. At CIFOR and in many other places, we work increasingly with the concept of evidence-based policies. We must become more systematic, more relevant in the research we do to influence and inform the important policies, including those of landscapes. And that's also very much the purpose of today. We will have 18 technical and networking sessions today, and they are hosted by many of the world's leading research and development organizations. The goal is, of course, to share the latest research, experiences, and thinking on specific landscape themes. And importantly, each of these sessions have been asked to provide recommendations, summaries that feed into day 2 of the Landscapes Forum and eventually into the report of the forum as a whole. I ask you to really pick up that ball and deliver some interesting conclusions and text for us so that we can use that. We will also take the report from the forum as a whole back to the UNFCCC negotiators, and you will hear more about that tomorrow. I also want to spend a little time on the youth session that is still ongoing. We started today with a special session called Youth, the Future of Sustainable Landscapes. And we've had almost 200 people listening to young entrepreneurs from Asia, Africa, and Latin America who have shared their experiences that face and challenges that face youth around the world. And That included to overcome what is sometimes a negative perception of what it is to be a farmer. And also, of course, to help mobilize young people to achieve a sustainable future. And if you consider, again, that half of the world's people, half of the 7 billion people are under the age of 30, I think we should really acknowledge this force and acknowledge that this is where the energy for change will come from. So the youth session is still going on, as I understand, and I really look forward to their inputs to the Global Landscapes Forum report as well. So by that, I again welcome you all to the Global Landscapes Forum Day 1. I'm really, really curious to see how this goes, but I'm confident that it will be an extremely interesting and fruitful event. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Peter, for your remarks and for really framing the GLF environment over the next few days. At this point, I have the honor of introducing Mr. Olgierd Dziekoński. He's the Secretary of State of the Chancellery of the President of the Republic of Poland. Mr. Dziekoński.
Dear friends, friends of the landscape, it's a great opportunity for me to say to all of you, the people who believe and trust in the landscape as an important part of the human culture, to say hello here in Warsaw. The landscape is a part of our human being. It has to be seen as a very special synthesis of the human activity and the nature as such. The landscape, which is consisting of the urbanized areas, rural areas, forestry and waters, has to be changed and treated in a way which will be a good inheritance for the future. Here in Poland, we've had an opportunity since the last years to increase the forestation of the country. Since 50 years, 60 years, the forestation in the country has been increased to 2.5 million hectares of the forest. In the last 24 years, with the new with the new renewed political system, market economy, based on a market economy and democracy, we have had a chance to increase the forestation at the level of about 0.5 million hectares. But that has been done at the same time when the agriculture production has been increased and the export of agriculture products significantly has increased for the benefit of the country economy. So it shows that this synthesis can be useful and helpful both for the nature and both for the economy, for us, for human beings. What is important in that respect? Important is a discussion and debate. The institutions like the Ministry of Environment, Ministry of Agriculture, the Polish state holding, forest holding, which is managing over the 80% of the forest in Poland, are very helpful to do that. But these efforts will not be successful if not the strong democratic approach at the local level. The decentralization in a country, which has happened 24 years ago, is a very strong and important stakeholder at this process. The decentralization means that in a political sense, the message, the strong message from this meeting has to be passed to all of the citizens, because in a democratic way, they will choose the proper local policies. They will choose and promote the policies for the better landscape all over the country, all over Europe, all over the world. So I think the debate, which is on such an important issue like a landscape, which is our common good, should not be derived from the democracy, should not be derived from the actors who are playing the very significant role at this process, the local democracy. This horizontal approach, which goes with this type of the debate, will be successful both for the landscape treated as a heritage of the nature, but also the landscape treated as a heritage of us. The role of the President of Poland at this process, in our case, is also significant. Quite recently, the President of Poland, Mr. Bronisław Komorowski, has submitted to the Parliament the new law how to increase protection of the landscape by providing the special means and tools for the local and regional governments. So I think that this bottom-up approach and the approach based on the debate between the people is the only possible solution to be really successful and efficient in promotion and protecting the landscape. And let's try to be successful in this way. Let's leave to our successor the landscape in a better shape when we have than we obtained that from our predecessors. Let's wish and let's believe that it can be done, and I believe that this meeting will help to do that for all of us for future. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Secretary Dziekoński. I think particularly apt remarks on localizing the outcomes of GLF and exploring the way forward together. At this point, I'd like to invite Sara Scherr up to the podium. She is the founder and president of EcoAgriculture Partners. Sara.
Good morning, everyone. I'm distinguished Vice-Rector of the University of Warsaw, Your Excellency, the Secretary of State of Poland, honorable delegates to the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change. I know many of you are out there. Dr. Holmgren, ladies and gentlemen, many thanks and congratulations to all of the organizers of the Global Landscape Forum. It really is exciting to see all the key agriculture, forestry, and climate actors finally talking and acting together. There's a buzz about landscapes these days, and to many, I think, are still thinking about it as a theoretical kind of a structure. But as the previous speakers already today have mentioned, landscapes are real things in the world. They are large areas where mosaics of land use that are deeply interconnected socially and ecologically. They're places where people live and make their livelihoods by drawing on resources from across the landscape. Indeed, we're asking our landscapes to provide many complex things for us, to feed us, to clothe us, to provide for beauty and sacred spaces, to water our crops and quench our thirsts. And now we're also asking for them to capture carbon from the atmosphere and keep it locked away. Because our landscapes do so many different things for us, it's critical that we not focus on just one or two objectives at the expense of others. The challenge is severe, epic even, for places like this is Maputo in Mozambique, where farmed areas and forests are critical not only for supplying food, fiber, and fuel, but also for ensuring habitats for people, green space, a secure water supply in the face of a changing climate. We need climate-smart practices on farms and in diverse land uses across the landscape that help communities to adapt to climate change. We need to manage land use interactions across the landscape to increase synergies and to reduce the trade-offs between these different needs. And many of the ways that do that will also help to mitigate and reduce greenhouse gases from the atmosphere. This is a picture from Queensland, Australia. In this state, which is in the wet tropics of Australia, they have estimated that 77% of the greenhouse gas emissions produced by their economy can potentially be reduced or offset through rural land uses by improving fertilizer use efficiency, improving pasture management, and reducing deforestation, also incorporating more perennial crops. But a coalition of local farmers, agribusinesses, and many other stakeholders are now collaborating to not only achieve these goals, which will mitigate climate change and adapt to it, but they're trying specifically to do it in ways that will protect the 2 World Heritage Sites that are in the state, the coral reefs along the coast, improve agricultural profits, protect local water sources, and enhance food security. And in Tigray, Ethiopia, we see one of the many places around the world where integrated landscape management has already made a huge difference to the livelihoods and economies of millions of people, and also an effort that's providing a platform for scaling up climate action. Here, chronically food insecure farming communities in more than 450 sub-watersheds have banded together with government support and support of others to restore highly degraded landscapes through holistic watershed restoration strategies. Combining technical expertise and participatory planning, they managed to restore tree and grass cover, to enrich soils, and do rainwater harvesting that has enabled many of these communities to start doing irrigated agriculture with much higher levels of productivity. Reliance on food aid has dramatically declined. Drinking water access was restored as the groundwater was recharged, and wild species have also returned. Land use is becoming a carbon sink rather than a source of major emissions through degradation. And the government is building on this now all across the country. What have we learned from such experiences about what actually makes integrated landscape management work? Well, I want to highlight 5 key things. First, stakeholders must negotiate together and agree on broad management objectives for the landscape. Secondly, they need to promote, wherever possible, land uses on fields, farms, and forests that do achieve multiple objectives right there in that space. Third, they need to manage ecological, social, and economic interactions across the landscape to reduce trade-offs and realize synergies. Fourth, they need to establish collaborative decision-making processes that fully engage communities. And fifth, they need to promote markets and public policies that support and provide incentives for integrated action. I imagine that almost everyone here knows at least a few examples of integrated landscape management in practice fairly well. That's because there are thousands in place today. With partners, we've begun an inventory worldwide of these initiatives and already documented 104 in Latin America, 87 in Africa, and their inventory is underway in Asia, Europe, and the United States. In fact, there's been an explosion of innovation and efforts to sustain important landscape values in the face of dynamic changes in our economy and society. We've identified more than 80 different communities of practice, each with its own language and terminology and its own approach that usually reflects the entry point. But they may have gone in with water or biodiversity or land degradation, but they're now managing these initiatives to reach the whole range of objectives that are important to people in those landscapes. Networks are forming to support these approaches. Some of them you may know: Land Care, Model Forest Network, globally important agricultural heritage sites, the International Partnership for Satoyama, the Global Partnership for Forest and Landscape Restoration. All of these approaches are variations on integrated landscape management, and people from all these communities of practice are gathered at this forum now to move this agenda forward. But these initiatives face major challenges for flourishing and for scaling up. Funding, technical expertise, research, and policy still operate largely as separate sectoral silos. We need institutions that can champion these approaches and span the boundaries between agriculture, forestry, and other sectors and link our communities of practice. That's why in 2011, we formed the Landscapes for People, Food, and Nature initiative. Partners from more than 50 international and local organizations around the world are now working for analysis, for policy and action to scale up integrated landscape management, and we're still looking for more partners. But there are still major knowledge gaps before we can realize the full potential of climate-smart landscapes. First, we need more research on win-win-win production and management systems. We recently reviewed 229 scientific studies on 5 agroecological practices and found that often these have positive benefits for soils, for water quality, for biodiversity, and for climate, as well as having comparable or higher yields of production. But we do not know why. We have not done the science to understand these processes, and if we did, we could intentionally develop more effective systems. Secondly, we need more research to understand how ecosystem services flow throughout the landscape among different and between different land uses, and to measure the magnitude of the impacts of specific kinds of interventions. This is still a big gap. We also need, in this early stage, we do not have a very clear understanding about the institutions that are needed to support integrated landscape management, particularly the policy frameworks that are needed, how to mobilize the constructive engagement of businesses in these initiatives, how to mobilize financing for investment, and how to improve stakeholder processes and governance. Integrating land and resource management across whole landscapes, I think, offers one of the most promising strategies to build climate-smart economies and societies. Climate is not a separate sector, but it can be a catalyst for landscape integration if climate solutions are conceived with the broad landscape perspective for its numerous co-benefits. Our objective should not be limited to promoting climate-smart activities, but shift the whole society and economy in a development trajectory of low emissions and high sequestration. The UNFCCC itself can be a catalyst if we think smart about land use and are ambitious about mobilizing changes at scale. We can also position climate-smart landscapes as central to achieving the Sustainable Development Goals post-2015, as this approach enables us to pursue a range of goals in an effective, cost-efficient, coordinated, and synergistic way. And our deliberations here, I hope, at the Global Landscapes Forum will help to craft the mental models, the institutional mandates, and the political motivation that will be needed to do so. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Sara. Particularly, it was a very holistic view of some of the challenges and some of the opportunities that we face in landscapes together, and I think that we'll get into some of these topics over the next few days. At this point, I'd like to invite our final speaker up to the podium, Mr. Braulio Diaz, Executive Secretary for the Convention on Biological Diversity. Mr. Diaz.
Good afternoon to all, members of the panel, Secretary of State, Vice-Rector, CIFOR President, President of EcoAgriculture Partners. Ladies and gentlemen, it is a pleasure and honor to address you in this first Global Landscape Forum, held on the margins of the talks which hopefully will lead us into agreements in 2015 on climate change and parallel discussions on future sustainable development goals, which also we hope to achieve in 2015. Before I begin, I would like to thank the co-organizers of the forum, in particular the Ministry of Environment and the Ministry of Agriculture and Rural Development of the Republic of Poland, our host, the University of Warsaw, as well as the Center for International Forestry Research on behalf of the Collaborative Partnership on Forests, and the research program on climate and change in agriculture and food security on behalf of the International Consortium on Agriculture and Rural Development. We are connected to biodiversity in one way or another. Through the water we drink and use, the soil and land that nurtures our food, fiber, fuel, the plants and animals that offer us discoveries in medicine, the genetic diversity that helps to adapt to climate change and other land use changes and build more resilient landscapes against climate change and natural disasters, the ways biodiversity delivers cultural and leisure benefits, and much more. Biodiversity is the source of our health, our habitat, living space, and our humanity. Many of our productive sectors stem for and depend on biodiversity. For example, sectors associated with water supply, food, nutrition, agriculture, fisheries, forestry, health, energy, transport, and tourism, they all depend significantly on health and healthy and resilient of biodiversity. These interdependencies impact directly on human well-being and on the Earth life support system, on which the welfare of current and future generations depend. Food production, for example, depends largely on biodiversity and the ecosystems provided and the services provided by ecosystems. Our crop varieties and animal breeds in the thousands are made possible due to the rich genetic pool of species they originate from. This genetic diversity of crops and livestock allows not only for adaptation to current needs, but also ensures the adaptability to meet future changes, including those resulting from climate change, and the potential to further increase yields that will be necessary to meet the expected food demands. Hence, biodiversity requires effective management, including protection, to ensure food security in times of climate variability and change. But our reliance on the services provided by ecosystems, including forests, grasslands, agro-ecosystems, to meet the growing demands of an increased population has an uneven focus, often undermining our other essential ecosystem services linked to social and ecological well-being. Nature is a critical asset for sustainable human development, making ecosystem management for healthy, productive, sustainable livelihoods and resilient communities fundamental across the broader landscape. This is what the Convention on Biological Diversity entails when implementing the principles of ecosystem approach. The concept places people at the center and ecosystems as natural resource management systems with numerous functions and multiple benefits to provide for humanity. But as dynamic and evolving systems, ecosystems are inherently complex, and their management and conservation takes a greater deal of work over temporal and spatial scales. We live in a world of economic, social, and environmental change. While striving for efficiency and growth, we have to balance socioeconomic and livelihood dimensions that call for more equitable returns, peace and security, and resilience to the evolving global conditions. Estimates shows that ecosystems deliver essential services worth trillions of dollars each year. Yet close to 2/3 of the world's ecosystems are considered degraded in one way or another due to damage to mismanagement and a failure to invest and reinvest in their productivity, health, and sustainability. In the last 50 years, humans have transformed ecosystems and landscapes more rapidly than in any comparable period in human history. The current extent and trends of ecosystem degradation and resulting loss of ecosystem services jeopardize the livelihoods of people and the ecological security of our planet. Ultimately, it affects all people, with more severe and immediate threats to the poor and the vulnerable, women, children, and indigenous people. Greater attention is required to help restore ecosystems to their former condition or towards a desired self-sustaining ecological state. It is our role to ensure that the structural and functional capacities of ecosystems and their response and interaction with other components in a landscape are properly integrated and managed. Ladies and gentlemen, the role of biodiversity in sustainable development is fundamental. While acknowledged as a contribution to sustainable development, the reverse is also important. Sustainable development needs to provide the enabling conditions for biodiversity conservation and sustainable use. We need a transformational shift from all parts of society. For example, significant change in our consumption and production patterns incentive measures are needed in order to make conservation and sustainable use more equitable and for the drivers of biodiversity loss to be reduced. Taking a landscape approach to conserve, restore, and sustainably use biodiversity can provide solutions to a range of challenges. From policies to practice, we have started to see inspiring cases of transformation and innovation. For instance, experience shows that protected areas or community conserved forest areas within a landscape can provide significant ecosystem services, such as improved water supplies and regulation of local climate. In turn, ensuring access to ecosystem services for the poor and vulnerable groups has helped alleviate poverty, reduce deforestation and degradation, and enhance the carbon stocks in forests, drylands, rangelands, and croplands. Conserving and restoring ecosystems is proven to be a cost-effective way to mitigate climate change, and also offers a means to generate social and economic benefits and opportunities, while in many cases also offering benefits in terms of climate change adaptation, for instance, improved resilience against extreme weather conditions. For example, the Action Plan for the Prevention and Control of Deforestation in my country, in the Brazilian Amazon, has helped to reduce deforestation in the region, together with the use of satellite monitoring of the forest cover, heightening the law enforcement measures and land tenure regulation. These actions have triggered important measures to help address land use and to stimulate the growth of the economy on the basis of sustainability and conservation. As we explore the landscapes, their interactions, dependencies, and objectives, I'd like to convey two messages on how the strategic plan for biodiversity for 2011 to 2020 can support this work. The first is through cooperation. Since biodiversity connects all of us, how we leverage the connections will be critical to address the global challenges and secure more sustainable pathways now and in the future. For this, we need to understand the process involved, the value of our ecosystems as key factors in generating and sustaining food and water security, as well as adequate nutrition, regulating climate, securing human health, and alleviating poverty. Accordingly, in 2010, the Convention on Biological Diversity adopted the Strategic Plan for Biodiversity for 2011 to 2020, together with the Aichi biodiversity targets, providing a global framework for action for biodiversity conservation and sustainable use to contribute to sustainable development. The strategic plan has been recognized and supported by the governing body of other biodiversity-related conventions, such as CITES, Ramsar, CMS, the International Treaty on Plant Genetic Resources for Food and Agriculture, the World Heritage Conventions, and others. The strategic plan is therefore an excellent framework for cooperation among stakeholders with varied specific interests, allowing us to work towards a common vision, but each contributing in its own field. The conservation has partnered directly with many governmental and non-governmental entities in support of efforts to achieve the objectives of the strategic plan, including its vision for 2050, its 5 strategic goals, and the 20 Aichi biodiversity targets to be achieved by 2020. In addition, many partners have independently strengthened their cooperation, utilizing the strategic plan as a basis for identifying relevant action. Given its overarching framework and sustainable development priorities, the UN General Assembly encouraged stakeholders to use elements of the strategic plan in the elaboration of the post-2015 UN Development Agenda. But achieving these goals is not a one-time action. It is a process, one that requires concerted efforts, resources, commitments, engagement across sectors, as well as civil society engagement. Cooperation across sectors will help maintain and enhance the ability of ecosystems to support sustainable increases in productivity while reducing impacts at multiple scales. Together, we can provide benefits for producers and consumers and maintain our natural capital. My second message is on integrating biodiversity values in the other sectors. We must learn to measure what we treasure. While monetary values and benefits of ecosystem services are becoming more and more researched, the benefits expressed in non-monetary terms tend to be difficult to collect data on, monitor, and to acknowledge. Some values remain difficult to quantify, particularly ecosystem services not traded on markets. Where their values are not reflected in markets for other goods and services, there is an ongoing problem of these benefits being marginalized and eroded in the economies. These values are equally important to understand and reflect in policies and managements. For example, the practices and traditional knowledge of indigenous and local communities have guided the management of our natural resources for centuries and millennia. What we benefit from the holders of this knowledge is irreplaceable, but often misappreciated. Thus, by neglecting the ecological foundation behind market goods, we omit the incorporation of ecological values into market mechanisms. We also overlook the important interactions that users of biodiversity, informing individuals, companies, and governments of the benefits of conserving and utilizing biodiversity and related ecosystem service in a sustainable manner. The CBD has been working closely with the UN Statistics Division, the WAVES Initiative, the TEEB, and other partners to support research on natural ecosystems accounting and valuation to provide estimates of the services and their economic value. But this is only the start. More work is needed to help strengthen the ability of countries to conduct biodiversity and ecosystem services related assessments, to inform trade-off choices and win-win solutions in developing planning for the decisions on policy making. These actions are easier said than done, but they are achievable. Experience on how to carry out ecosystems accounting exists, and this experience needs to be shared and the approach mainstream. So in the course of today's technical and networking sessions, I'm interested to hear your experiences and lessons learned regarding what has worked well and what has not worked so well. I look forward to hearing more about how we can scale up public and private efforts in enhancing cooperation. These are essential ingredients to achieve the aspirations as agreed in the strategic plan for biodiversity. The major actors in both conservation and development are recognizing the critical contribution of biodiversity makes to human livelihoods, poverty eradication, empowerment, and sustainable development at large. I'm increasingly encouraged by the emerging consensus I see previously polarized groups and sectors. We are getting much better at identifying and implementing win-win solutions that utilize the benefits of biodiversity to improve efficiencies, increase resilience, and meet multiple objectives. However, we need a deeper understanding of the interdependency and links within the value systems across landscapes to ensure that biodiversity continues to contribute to food security, socio-ecological resilience, and poverty reduction. And equally that, in return, biodiversity is sustainably used and protected in view of the mounting global and local pressures. Moving on this track, we also need an improved understanding of how to overcome social, political, and institutional constraints to implement fully effective based approach to sustainability, and how to shift from a pilot project approach to a mainstreaming, integrated, and upscaling approach. If we act together, we can safeguard biodiversity and put it to good use with a sustainable and resilient landscape that meets multiple needs for food production, ecological restoration, conservation, and improved livelihood for all people. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Mr. Diaz. Let's have one more round of applause for our truly distinguished panel for this open-air plenary session. So at this time, we'll conclude the opening plenary session, but what will follow is 2 rounds of technical and networking sessions, the first beginning at 2 p.m., and the second beginning at 4:30 p.m. Between those two sessions, I'd like to bring to your attention one event that will be happening, which is the official opening of the Gender Cafe, which is located in the old library building. That begins at 4 p.m., and there will be comments from Peter Holmgren of CIFOR and from Bruce Campbell as well from CCAS. The old library building is located immediately behind the GLF entrance tent. Also, another item of housekeeping here, I'd like to remind all of the organizers of TNS sessions to ensure that they send their recommendations and their outcome statements, which will be issued tomorrow. And this can be best done by transferring those statements and outcomes to a GLF volunteer on a USB stick, or it can be sent to the email address that was provided to you yesterday. Finally, we'd like to express our thanks again to everyone here in the room today and to all of our online participants as well. Again, we wish to wish you a very warm welcome to the Global Landscapes Forum. We'd ask now that you proceed directly to the TNS sessions, which begin at 2 o'clock. Thank you very much.